اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم وسلم عليه. By the grace of the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we've gathered for another monthly program where we explore different themes every single month that revolve around everyday issues, problems, things that we might face. And then also we talk about how we can better ourselves. How can we define ourselves as Muslims? How can we become better Muslims? These are all themes that we explore, and we center each and every month around one theme. Inshallah, today's program, the theme is becoming a Sufi in the 2000s. That will answer questions like, what does that mean? What are all the related thoughts and opinions of people around being a Sufi? Right? We hear that word all the time, but some of us don't even know what is the true essence of it, what is the true meaning of it. How do I relate to being a Sufi? So inshallah, just like every other program, we start with the recitation of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran. And inshallah, we invite Qari Hassan Wahwa, who will be reading for us, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بتقواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها صدق الله العظيم.
MashaAllah. Qari Hassan Wahwa was reciting from, can anyone tell me what surah that was? Surah Shams, meaning the sun. Now I specifically asked him to recite the surah for us today for a reason to introduce this topic to us. Tasawwuf, Sufism. First I'm going to read the whole translation of the surah, and then let's dissect it. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate and ever merciful. By the sun and by its brightness, and by the moon when it follows the sun, and by the day when it displays the sun, and by the night when it draws a veil over the sun, and by the heaven and by that which built it, and by the earth and by that force by which Allah's command pulled it apart, and by the human soul, and by the one who provided it with an all-dimensional pose, perfection. Then He inspired it with vice and virtue. Who can tell me what vice and virtue is? Very easy definition of vice and virtue. Good and bad. To do good and to do bad. Indeed, this is the important line. Indeed, the one who purifies himself or his self from all vain and vicious desires and cultivates in it virtues and piousness succeeds. Let me put that into simple English. Indeed, the one who cleans their heart, who cleans themselves from the inside, who purifies themselves from the inside, to be pious, to be good people, people who don't do bad, are the people who succeed. Who succeeds? Those that purify themselves. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, but the one who corrupts himself in sins is doomed indeed. The people of Thamud rejected their Prophet ﷺ due to their rebellion. When the most wretched of them stood up, Allah's Messenger said to them, guard that sheep camel in the time of her taking water. The Prophet ﷺ brought the sheep camel to their people, Thamud. They had chased it, they had prosecuted the gift, as he had told them that this is a protected camel. But they rejected the messenger, and they harm-strung the she-camel. So because of their sin, their Lord sent down destruction on them and leveled them and their whole town. And Allah does not fear any repercussions of this devastation. So the reason I started with this surah is because of the one ayah number 9, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states that indeed the ones who purify themselves from the inside, their self. What is self? You take a shower, that's one side of things, that's purifying yourself, right? I hope you all take a shower. I feel like I'm smelling something stinky, joking. Now you purify yourselves, but then you purify your heart. You take care of your heart. The thing that makes you do good and bad. Your mind, the things that influences your thoughts. So the question comes, what does this have to do with the soul? Sufism. The word Sufi and tasawwuf. Who can tell me what tasawwuf means? Anybody? Take a jab at it. Yes. Journey? No. Anyone else from the sister side? Tasawwuf. Anyone? Brothers? What I lean on you. Tasawwuf means spirituality. We oftentimes, we sit down. Actually, let me talk about modern day society. What is spirituality to our brothers and sisters at school, our friends at school? Their spirituality is doing some good yoga, going like this and connecting themselves with nature, right? No. Spirituality in Islam, it is the active effort that you make to be in remembrance of who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Simplest definition. So next time someone asks you what is the tasawwuf, you say spirituality But now understand what the spirituality means. It means your remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The word tasawwuf and Sufi comes from the root word of al-safa. Al-safa. Who can tell me what that means? Anyone want to take a jab at it? Yes. Cleanliness, purification, mashallah, you're right. It means purity. The nature of spirituality is what? Purity. That's a big ask. You sure all the time? It's a big ask. Why? The society that we live in, what do you have all the time in your hand? A phone. I think it's a phone, right? Like half of you are asleep. What is this? The phone. What do you do on a phone? You play games. We do a lot more than that. Social media. The internet. Everything's at the palm of our hand. Everything. So we see good and bad all the time. So the process of purifying ourselves has become so hard. Because the nature of doing good is taken away from us in the society. Right? It's so hard. You think, I spend 6 hours on Instagram every single day. Alright, I'm even more modest. Probably you guys what spend 3 hours? 3 hours? 2 hours? Hassan maybe 7 hours? Yeah, 7 hours. Let's say 7 hours. In those hours that you spend scrolling on social media, by a modest guess, 50% of what you see is not something you would like to see. Most of the time. Nowadays, and this is for the older audience, we all know what algorithms are, right? The algorithm is designed in a way to show us something new, something that might interest us. It pushes us in a direction of something that we don't know we like yet until they make us like it. It plays into our desires. Very hard, isn't it? When you're constantly being bombarded, like, oh, that dress would look nice. Oh, those shoes would look nice. Right? Oh, did you see that new phone just came out? These thoughts, if put into a different lens, are vices. What are vices? Bad things. Why? It's because it's detaching you from love and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what I've done just there is I've defined the word tasawwuf for you. Tasawwuf and being a Sufi go hand in hand. Shaykh Abdullah, please. But let me do this instead. Let me define tasawwuf and Sufi by what it isn't. Raise your hand and tell me what you think a Sufi is. Let's start with that. Yes. Very, very nice. He thinks his friend is a Sufi. Yes. Someone who always does zikr? Good. Yeah. Sisters, I need some replies from that. Whatever you think is a Sufi, I'm not gonna. Whatever your thoughts are. Rajesha? Okay. Anyone else? G? G? Yep, I can translate that. Whoever's lost, while walking and sitting and whatever, they're lost in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and their iman is very strong. That's how Auntie has defined it, being a Sufi. Someone else give me a definition. Some older guys. Yes. Disconnect themselves from this current world. Now, I loved all of your replies because every element of what you discussed has a definition in the tasawwuf and Sufism. Why? Disconnecting yourself is a practice of khalwa. What is khalwa? seclusion. All the way from Prophet Musa alayhi salam, the prophets had practiced seclusion. We learn from the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Was it only for those 20 years of prophethood? No. It was from the birth of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We take the examples from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and it was in his nature. And this is narrated. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, ever since he was little, he would go into a cave in seclusion. He would just be in remembrance, in constant thinking of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in constant remembrance. The question becomes, what is khalwa in the 21st century? Because there's no way I'm going to step away from my life, go sit in a cave, and become a Sufi. Anyone up for that challenge? I'm sure the ones who don't have friends like us would. Yeah? You can't do that possibly, right? Stepping away from everything as you know it, going to the mountains, sitting in seclusion, and praying, oh, I'm going to become a Sufi now. Now the nature has changed of doing it. So what was important about seclusion? Was it the fact that you sat in a cave alone? Or was it important that you detached yourself and only sat in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What's more important? You sitting in a cave or being completely in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Yes. Completely in the remembrance. Now sorry, my voice is pretty thin and I don't speak too loud. So for the brothers sitting at the back, it's probably easier for me if you guys stop speaking so I can get the message through. So we've talked about khalwa and seclusion, right? That's your answer. Now let's go to your answer. Hassan, your answer was zikr. What is zikr? What is the ayah? فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ? And what does that mean? Yes. So remember me and I shall remember you. Who's saying this? Who's saying this? Sisters? Your brother? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is he saying? So remember me, so I shall remember you. That is zikr. When you sit down and your parents just told you read one tasbih, don't think, oh, I gotta make myself do 100 beads. No. Think that every second that you say Allahu Akbar or Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, that you understand the meaning, you're remembering Allah, you're getting close to Allah. That is zikr. Because when you get close and you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let me tell you this, that this is the secret to success. By being in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the last answer was being in a constant state of remembrance. The reason why I bring that as the last answer is because that encompasses everything I just talked about. Being a Sufi in the 21st century is not about the clothes you wear. Some people define the word Sufi as a coarse robe. Back in the day, the Sufis used to wear this robe, right? The robe would be very soft on the outside, but on the inside, it was very coarse. It was difficult to wear. It's like that material that makes you itch all the time. Why? It's so they could stay uncomfortable. They can stay in a state that they're stepping away from comfort. They're disciplining themselves. Now, some people only define a Sufi as someone who wears a wool coat. But here is the definition. A Sufi is not someone you judge based on their clothes, or to judge them for the fact that they wear a ring, or they wear a very nice robe, or they wear a jubbah that looks nice, they look religious. No. A Sufi is defined by their personality and their characteristic of being in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when they sit, when they walk, when they sleep, when they're laying down, when they're at work, when they're at school, when they're studying, when they're doing their work, when they're eating. Everything they do, their heart is completely detached from everything in this material world, and it's attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now I just gave you a definition of what a Sufi is. Are we satisfied with this definition? Are there any questions at this point? I'm open to take any questions. Okay. Now can I ask one of you, now, what is a Sufi? Anyone willing to answer now? Yes? Step away from this dunya and transform Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May we take this understanding and we action this as that a Sufi is not someone who wears Sufi clothes. A Sufi is not someone who speaks very well or is very poetic. Right? Some people you meet them and you say, "Ye bada Sufi." He's a Sufi. Why? Oh, you heard the way he talks, he sounds like a philosopher. The way he speaks is very poetic. No. Like the way that you find someone who is very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam states that you know a person is in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a company that is good for you. When you see them, when you look at them, you remember your deen. You remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So next time, you go in your company, your friend group, rethink that if this is a step that I want to take, are the friends and people that I surround myself, people who remind me of my deen? Now some kid's gonna come up to me and say, "Oh, my friends are so bad, I think about being good." Right? "Oh man, I see them do the craziest stuff, it makes me want to do good stuff." That's not what I mean. What I mean is that the person is by nature someone who is religious, someone who is close to Allah, someone who is in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you naturally have a feeling that you want to get up and you remember that you haven't prayed Asr at this point and I want to read Asr. Oh, mother's coming up, or I may saw her earlier, I should read my Qazal. That is company that inspires this way of living, this Sufi lifestyle in the 21st century. And I feel like maybe to some of you, probably I was rambling a bit too much. So we'll do a little nasheed in the remembrance of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and poetry. And then our dear brother, our young brother will also do a speech. And then inshallah we'll ask Shaykh Abdullah Raja as well to speak. So I'd like to invite again Qari Hassan Rahman and Qari Ali Akbar as well. Inshallah. Hafizullah.
يا إمام الرسل يا سندي الله الله أنت باب الله معتمدي فبدنياي وبآخرتي الله الله يا رسول الله خذ بيدي قسما بالنجم حين هوى ما المعافى والسقيم سوى فاخلع الكونين عنك سوانا الله الله ربي مولى العرب والعجم يا إمام الرسل يا سندي الله الله أنت باب الله معتمدي فبدنياي وبآخرتي الله الله يا رسول الله خذ بيدي ما رأت عين وليس ترى الله الله مثل طه في الورى بشرا خير من فوق السماء ثرى الله الله طاهر الأخلاق والسيم يا إمام الرسل يا سندي الله الله أنت باب الله معتمد فبدنياي وبآخرتي الله الله يا رسول الله خذ بيدي قامون سر النبي قامون وجميل سر النبي وجميل قامون سر النبي قامون وجميل سر النبي وجميل وكف المصطفى كالورد ينادي الله الله وعطرها يبقى إذا مست أيادي الله الله وكف المصطفى كالورد ينادي الله الله وعطرها يبقى إذا مست أيادي الله الله وعم نوالها كل العباد وعم نوالها كل العباد وعم نوالها كل العباد حبيب الله يا خير البراء يا
قمر سيدنا النبي قمر وجميل سيدنا النبي وجميل
ولا ظل له بل كان نورا الله الله تنال الشمس منه والنور الله الله ولا ظل له بل كان نورا الله الله تنال الشمس منه والنور الله الله ولم يكن الهدى لولا نورا ولم يكن الهدى لولا نورا ولم يكن الهدى لولا نورا وكل الكون أنار بنور طه
قمر سيدنا النبي قمر وجميل سيدنا النبي وجميل
MashaAllah. Our dear young brothers are reciting and reading in worship of and in praise of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the question becomes, the Sufis have a practice of sama', practice of thana, the practice of standing and praising the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And many times, the question becomes, where did they get this from? They pluck the practice like this out of thin air, and they just start reciting in praise of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a hadith related to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he would call upon Hazrat Hassan bin Zabit radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and they would get this pulpit. Do you guys know what a pulpit is? A pulpit. They would get a pulpit made for him. Where in those days, a pulpit was a bit different. A place for him to sit upon, like a higher elevation. Let me restart that. So we're talking about who? Hazrat Hassan bin Zabit. He would come and he was called upon by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they made a pulpit for him to sit on, a high elevation. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would order him to recite. He would say, "Oh Hassan, recite. Oh Hassan, begin. Oh Hassan, start." And what would he read? What would he sing? Sayyidina Hassan, he would begin to recite his praise for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his love for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then sometimes during that time, Islam had many enemies, who would say many things about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what would Sayyidina Hassan say? In his recitation, in his poetry, in his singing, he would defend the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And many of you, you've heard the beginning of this Ashir Qamaru, which means what? Yes. Oh moon, oh brilliant moon, Nawajameen, oh beauty, referring to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We often read another line at the beginning that says, وَأَحْسَنُ مِنْكَ لَمْ تَرَ قَطُّ عَيْنِي وَأَحْسَنُ مِنْكَ لَمْ تَرَ قَطُّ عَيْنِي. And I have never seen anyone more strikingly beautiful than you. وَأَجْمَلُ مِنْكَ لَمْ تَلِدِ النِّسَاءُ. And no woman ever gave birth to anyone more noble than you. خُلِقْتَ مُبَرَّئًا مِنْ كُلِّ عَيْبٍ. O Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you have been created free from all defects, from all imperfections. كَأَنَّكَ قَدْ خُلِقْتَ كَمَا تَشَاءُ. It is indeed as if you have been created just as you wish. And the question becomes, who wrote this? Who recited this? The same Sayyidina Hassan bin Thabit, who stood in the pulpit in front of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wrote this poetry and recited it to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So who's to say a Sufi in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a Sufi in remembrance and in love with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam can't do the same? Right? And for that reason, you recite these nasheeds. You recite in remembrance and in love of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inshallah, now I'd like to invite our dear young brother, Sayyid Mustafa Imam, inshallah, and he'll be enlightening us with a couple of words and not boring you like I've been boring you, I hope. MashaAllah, please come.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Again, louder. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Sayyid Mustafa, and today I will be talking about Sufism. Imam Abu Bakr al-Kitana says that the tasawwuf or Sufism means becoming a better person on the inside and getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are two important things that you need to do to achieve this. The first is to be a good person by getting rid of all the bad habits like being mean or selfish and being kind or generous instead. The question that might come into our mind is that how we have to purify our heart. Making your heart pure is a process. You need to understand why it's important to be respectful to God and do what He wants you to do. Moreover, you need to know about the bad things that can make your heart sick and stop you from being respectful to God. You need to learn about these bad things so you can avoid them. Knowing these bad things are important for every single human being. The Prophet Muhammad stated that even if the son of Adam sins, a black dot will appear on his heart. If he repents, then he will erase. But if he doesn't, then the black dot would grow until the whole heart becomes pitch black. The second is to notice all the amazing things around you, like the beauty of nature or the kindness of others, and feel grateful for them. And the remembrance of Allah is essential in taking the spiritual path. The Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that the likeness of the one who remembers his Lord and the one who doesn't is like the living and the dead. The remembrance of God, which is vital to the cure of every disease of the heart. Another cure of the disease of the heart is reading the Quran. For example, recite Surah Al-Ikhlas, Surah Falaq, and Surah Nas 3 times each is highly recommended. When one recites while reflecting deeply on the meaning of these words, doors of insight open and one's iman can grow strong. Sometimes when we practice spiritually, we can have very powerful experiences, but our goal should not be just to have these experiences. It should be to follow the path that pleases Allah and lead us to salvation in the afterlife. If we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala often and do it the right way, our inner self can change in interesting ways that are being studied by scholars of the inner sciences. But we need to be careful because Shaitan can trick us if we don't know what we're doing. People who follow Tasawwuf work really hard to be pure and good in their thoughts and actions, even when it's difficult. They spend their entire life working towards this goal, and they don't mind if it takes a lot of effort. For those who do this, God will help them and show them the right way to live. When they finally reach their goal, they are referred as Sufis. Jazakallah khair. Thank you for listening.
MashaAllah. Great overall analysis of what is a Sufi. He spoke about many different elements of being remembrance, of staying consistent in worship, and then the main point is that don't keep your eye on the rewards, but the end goal. And what is that goal? The remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, before I pass this on, I'll leave you with 4 principles. 4 what? Principles that you can add into your daily life that are based on what? That are purely based on Quranic text and prophetic narration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Oftentimes people think that a lot of these things that Sufis do are just plucked from thin air. We take it and we add it into our lifestyle. And then they say, oh, they're just doing these things for many other reasons that may not be for what they say they are. So let's start. There is a practice of discomforting yourself, stepping away from things that are comfortable to you. right? In this world, we know we're only here for a short time. For those of you who think that you can live forever in this world, sorry to break the news to you. It's just like breaking the news that Santa doesn't exist either to a lot of other kids. But let me break the news to you. You live, and then you enter the next stage of life, which is the afterlife. Where inshallah, I hope to see you all as we enter through the gates of Jannah. Inshallah. So let's start with the first principle, limiting your speech. The nature of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is also mentioned in Shama'il al-Muhammadiyah by Imam Tirmidhi, that when he spoke, he only spoke when he needed to. When he spoke, he was very forward, straight. When he spoke, it was words of wisdom. It was words that he may have said 5 words, but they meant thousands. An ocean of knowledge would just leave. The floodgates of knowledge would just open as he spoke. But he spoke little. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke little. A lot of you, Hassan, tend to do this a lot. What we have to practice is this. And then sometimes a little bit of talking, and then again, this. Unfortunately, I'm a terrible example because all I've been doing since I came here is just talking, right? So maybe don't follow me, right? We'll be better than that. We'll limit our speech. Why? Because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam also limited his speech. Second principle, limit our sleep. This is interesting, this one. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, actually let me start. It's good to limit your sleep, right? But the question becomes, when do you limit your sleep? What are you doing? All right, I stopped sleeping 3 hours. I'll cut off 3 hours of my sleep. I'll only sleep 6 hours now. Or I'll only sleep 5 hours now. But man, I spend those 3 to 4 hours playing some Fortnite. Oh man, do I spend my time scrolling on Instagram? An effective use of time? Did I just see you nodding? You say yes, it's effective? Good use of your time? You're very confident it's a good use of your time. MashaAllah. No. When you're cutting your sleep, you're cutting it for a purpose. We don't just cut our sleep for no reason. The purpose is this. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when Deen was introduced to people, and the Deen was improving, the Quran was being revealed, he stood all night. He would pray on both of his legs, on both of his blessed feet. And as they would become numb and they would swell up his blessed feet, he would stand on one of his legs. And when that leg became tired, he would stand on the other leg. When that leg became tired, he would stand on the other leg. Until his beautiful and blessed feet became fully swollen. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has stated in the Holy Quran, in Surah Muzammil, that, oh my beloved, rise and stand in prayer at night, but for a short while, half the night or decrease it a little. So what were you commanded to do at night? Pray, but don't pray the whole night. Cut into your sleep. Discomfort yourself to comfort yourself in the akhirah. I like that. Let's make that a tagline. The next thing, third principle. Cut down food, eating. Everyone's jaws dropped. But I was planning on having a shawarma after this. No. All right. How to eat? Eating is by necessity, by creation. You need to eat. But for what reason do you eat? And how much do you eat? These are the questions that come to mind. When you fill up your stomach, do you fill it up to the point that you start bloating? Do you fill it up to the point that, man, if someone just pokes me, I'm gonna pop? You eat that much? No. It was a practice of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he would eat food once for 2 days. And this was narrated by Hazrat Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, until the end of his blessed life on this earth. Food once for 2 days. 2 breads, that's it. At that time, they had different types of salad. Now, we eat 3 healthy meals, a good 4 times a snack, and then before going to sleep, I need to put another plate of leftover food in my belly. None. The more you cut down on your food, the more you focus on, and you're aware, and you're conscious around you. Don't drown yourself in your sorrows by eating. Eat necessarily. That's the 3rd principle. The 4th principle, and the most important, the one that I've been waiting to tell you, is needless socialization. The nature of a Sufi is that we don't involve ourselves in, a Sufi does not involve themselves in needless socialization. What does that mean? But oh, Brother Ali, I need to talk to my parents. Or some of you are actually going to use this as an excuse. You're going to go home and you're going to tell your parents, oh, I don't have to talk to you anymore. I just heard in the masjid, I heard them say, I don't need to talk to you anymore. So the next time you ask me about my grades, I'm out of here. I was told not to speak. No needless socialization. Why are you complaining I don't sit with you anymore, Mom? I don't need to sit with you. No. There's a difference between necessity and things that are not necessary. All right? Let's define that. Your family, your close friends, your school, for those of you who work, these are socializations that you can't avoid. But the second you sit down, my dear brothers and sisters, remember this. The second that you sit down, and you'll learn this in life, and you reach a point in your conversation with somebody, that you start talking about somebody else, that you start gossiping, that you start backbiting, all those hasanah that you built up to this point, gone. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was sitting with his companions. He asked his companions, do you know what backbiting is? Abu Hurairah narrates this. He says, do you know what backbiting is? The companions replied, Ya Rasulullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his beloved messenger know best. This is respect. Prophet Muhammad replies, he says, what you say of your brother that is not good. And someone replies and asks Prophet Muhammad, but what if what I said is accurate? What if it's true? What if what I said is true? Prophet Muhammad replies, he says, if what you said is true, that is backbiting. And what if you said is false, that is an accusation. So remember this, the next time you sit in company, and you reach a point and you start talking about somebody else, that you start talking about anybody else. Hazrat Shaykh Abu Bakr Ashili from Baghdad, rahmatullahi alayhi, narrates the true bankruptcy. The true bankruptcy is needless socialization. What does that mean? Let me give you an example. Everyone can understand. Then we'll end here. This example is, imagine a dam where you store water. You all know what a dam is, right? It's an area where you store water. Imagine you pour all your good deeds and hasanah into it. Ramadan just passed. We spend every night, mashallah. You all spend your nights in worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You compile all these good deeds. But the second you sit down with somebody and your conversation does not become productive anymore, and you start gossiping or you start backbiting, the floodgates of the dam open and all those hasanahs start pouring out. And for the elder people, treat this like a balance sheet. You all do finances, right? Counting? A balance sheet. You incur revenue, your good deeds, you gain profit at the end, but the second you start gossiping or backbiting, needless socialization, things that lead to this, you'll come crashing down. Not only will you be zeroed out with no revenue, you'll incur debt as well. That's for the older people. Did we get that example? Reason why I say this is select your company particularly. So you're surrounded by people who make sure that you don't need to gossip. There's no way you can gossip. So 4 principles I talked about. What was it? Less sleep, less eating, less speaking, and avoiding needless socialization. I'll end there. I'll invite Sheikh Abdullah, Dr. Abdullah, inshallah, will be further enlightening you in a fun way, not my boring way, inshallah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الأمين المكين الكريم الرؤوف الرحيم. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإنك لعلى خلق عظيم. صدق الله العظيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه. Respected brothers and sisters, children, elders, alhamdulillah, we have gathered on the night of Jum'ah, mashallah, in the house of Allah to commemorate the Nabi of Allah while reciting the Quran of Allah and doing the zikr of Allah and His Rasul. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our worship. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our receiving. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept every single ounce of niyyah that we make that is productive in bringing us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Rasul. Ameen. First and foremost, let me just point out that a lot of children and elders perhaps, and definitely teenagers, feel that time spent in the masjid is a waste of time. It simply isn't. And no matter how much I will try to convince you, your elder brothers, your parents will try to convince you, nothing will convince you of this. You will continue to think it is a complete and utter waste of time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to open our eyes now, rather than they be opened for us on the day of judgment. Because every second that we spend in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, an angel is above us, reciting durood upon us for becoming the guests of Allah. There is no doubt in that as you enter the house of Allah, we become the guests of Allah. And one of the most foremost habits of the Sufis was to visit the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Sufis of old, and inshallah I'll get a little bit into it, they didn't have a habit of just going to one masjid. They would go to every masjid they could find. If somebody had a specific topic that they were good at, perhaps it was seerah, or usul al-fiqh, or usul al-tasawwuf, or seerah, or whatever, or hadith, or sciences of the hadith, whatever it was, they would go to get that small tidbit of knowledge from them. That is what they considered was tasawwuf for them. There were many definitions of tasawwuf thrown around. Imam Sharani, he has said, and in his book, in his Shama'il, he has stated that there are over 200, and he has stated each and every single definition of tasawwuf. A follower of tasawwuf at the utmost becomes a Sufi. That's why I'm using the term tasawwuf. He described 200 definitions of tasawwuf. And then he concluded all of them, and briefed and summarized all of them. And he says the summary of all 200 is this: anything that brings you closer to Allah is tasawwuf. So, if we drag this definition out a little bit, a Sufi is someone who brings you closer to Allah. Simply by looking at them. If that individual brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, know and understand that individual is a Sufi. However, if a person says, I am a Sufi, they're not a Sufi. A Sufi never utters that he is a Sufi. Another very important distinction that should be made. is all Sufis must be alims. All Sufis must be alims, but not all alims can be Sufis. All alims do not have to be Sufis. However, all Sufis must be alims, because in order to gain the connection with Allah, ilm is extremely important. Ilm is extremely important. Speaking of ilm, a little bit of ilm of tasawwuf for all of you. I won't get into too much of the details, but just as a base, you want to go into the realm of spiritualism, tasawwuf. You want to become a Sufi, there are 3 stages. The first is takhliya. The second is tahliya. The third is tajliya. And they differ with the kha, ha, and jim. And it's been very purposefully made that way, because kha has the dot, the nukta at the top, takhliya with a ta. Then it's tahliya, there's no dot. And then there's a tajliya, the dot is at the bottom. That dot signifies you as yourself. When you enter the realm of Sufism in the tasawwuf, you are at the stage of takhliya. You're the king of the world. You know it all. I'm already an alim, I'm going to become a Sufi now. So you enter that realm. And as you enter into the realm of takhliya, what happens is you are taught to let go and destroy everything that you know. The base of knowledge that you know is destroyed. And what is the base of knowledge? I'll give you a little bit of psychology here as well. When you're born with a certain amount of genetics. So 2 brothers here, Abu Bakr and Ali Akbar. The genome, their genetics, their DNA is pretty much identical. It's pretty much identical. They were born in the same family. They were given the same food. However, Abu Bakr is miles different than Ali Akbar. So for those of you that don't know, and perhaps you have brothers as well, perhaps younger brothers, even younger sisters, or elder brothers and elder sisters, there's a vast disparity between them. Even though you have the exact same set of conditions in psychology, the second principle comes in. Nature. And I'm sure some of you who have studied at least high school have gone over this debate of nature versus nurture, genetics versus environmental. Well, in Islam, what happens is you bring these two together. In Islam, you bring these two together. You have nature, and then you have environment, and you get the self. However, Islam then goes into detail about what happens when they mix. And that makes you unique as an individual. That makes you unique as an individual. And the reason that I'm saying this is because there's a Muslim psychologist, one of perhaps the most learned scholars today, in terms of psychology in Islam. His name is Abdullah Rafi. He was completing his BSc from Cambridge. And when he completed it, he says, and his whole research was into soul, nafs, in Islam. Like soul. What is the soul? What makes someone someone? And so he went and he studied as a monk in where the Buddhists in Serbia, and he stayed there. Then he went to India and stayed as a temple. He went to all these mystical places to figure out what everyone thinks soul is. He comes back, and as he comes back, one of his friends is a Muslim. He said, "You become a Buddhist, you become a monk, you become a Hindu, you become a Pandit. Try becoming a Muslim. Understand what the ruh is in Islam." So he says, well, where do I gain this knowledge? He says, well, my scholar, my teacher is from Sudan. Go to him. So he goes, he travels to Sudan, rich fellow, obviously, goes to Sudan, and he hasn't even done his master's. He's 23, 24, 25 years old, young man. Goes to Sudan. Within 3 months, he has accepted Islam. Within 3 months, he's accepted Islam. And somebody asks him, he says, Abdullah, what made you, and he's alive today, he's actually the principal at the University of Cambridge now in the psychology department. What made you Muslim? You can research him right now if you wish. Abdullah Rahman is his name. What made you Muslim? What about the knowledge of Islam that you gained in Sudan caused you to become Muslim? Not only that, but he actually married a Sudanese woman, the daughter of his teacher. And he said, well, I was in Sudan, and he studied there for almost 6 years. He also learned Arabic, he learned, there's an Nizami there, and he became an alim as well. But anyways, he says, I was there in Sudan, and every day I would leave Sudan. Sudan is in a very rich country. So people, they are very creative when you're not rich. When you're rich, you don't have to be as creative. You don't have to use your brain as much.
When you're poor, you always need to throw out your feelers. How can I earn more money? That's why youngsters are more energetic. Oh, if I sell this, the lace chips for my brother, I'll give him a toy in return. Always trying to make deals. How can I get something? So Sudanese people, they weren't very rich. So there was a young boy, and he says between the age of 10 and 12. He says he was a cobbler. He would clean shoes. And I stayed in a hotel, and he would stay outside the hotel, and every day he would be cleaning shoes of the passers-by. It's dirty, there's soil, there's dirt, not paved roads. He would clean, and we would give him whatever the currency was at that time. It's escaping my mind. But he would give him the currency. He says, however, every day for 3 months, I would leave, and this boy would see me. I don't know his name. He would see me, look at me, and he would say, Assalamu alaikum. Says, I had no idea what Assalamu alaikum was. I was just learning about Ruh. I was in a Western university learning about the Islamic teachings of what Ruh and soul is. Assalamu, he was always smiling. So he says, I became more and more, almost aggravated. Why does he say Assalamu? Why does he mean it with such meaning? So before we go into that, what does Assalamu alaikum mean? I know you guys know because you've attended one of my classes. So, Ibrahim, one of you guys at the back, what does, everyone said Assalamu alaikum, sisters? Correct me if I'm wrong. Everyone at some point has said Assalamu alaikum. So are you cursing someone? Well, if you don't know the meaning, how would you know? Yes. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. Wa rahmatullah. What does that mean? Rahmah is mercy. Man, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon you. Wa barakatuhu. What does that mean? Yes. Blessings. So salam and blessings. And then wa jannata halaluhu. What does that mean? May Jannah be halal upon you. Wa jahannam haramu, and may Jahannam be haram upon you. And then you can keep adding laqabs and to salam. Some salams, especially in the African culture, can be minutes long. So you're standing there, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu wa jannata halaluhu wa jahannam halaluhu wa muhabbata ahla baytuhu, and you continue and you continue and you continue, and they're smiling and shaking hands. Most of us, our hands get clammy, you're like, all right, buddy, step back a bit now. It's getting personal at this point. So this was the love that individuals have, and this is where the tasawwuf was born from. So anyways, I was going into this Abdullah Rahman, who was, Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum. So one day he stops and he's cleaning his shoes. He says, brother, what does Assalamu alaikum mean? He's learned a little bit of Arabic, he's conversing with him in Arabic. What does Assalamu alaikum mean? And he says, Assalamu alaikum means Assalamu alaikum. I don't know how else to describe it to you. He says, speak to one of my scholars. Speak to one of your teachers. So he goes, he takes him to the local madrasa. Madrasa still exists in Sudan. He goes, he says, what does Assalamu alaikum mean? The scholar, and this is so brief, so to the point, and yet it struck a chord in him. It struck a chord in him. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Insan, that for all of you, I am continuously returning you to me. There is something that Allah continually reverberates around you. Your iman is in levels. Sometimes it's all the way here. I'm going to go to the masjid, even if I have to come from 2 hours away. Sometimes you're passing by the masjid and Salat al-Maghrib. Up in there. Iman. Iman up and down, up and down. So the scholar speaks to him, he says, this guy is here, he's not a Muslim, but he wants to learn. And he's confused. Why do Muslims say, Assalamu alaikum? What is it that attaches you to it? The scholar looks at him and he says that we say Assalamu alaikum because it is the meeting of two souls. The re-meeting of two souls that have already met in Alim Arwah and that will meet again in Jannah. So we know that we come from a place of peace, we are in a place of peace, and we will be going into a place of peace. And so our souls have serenity and calmness. That's why we say that from that calmness, from that peace, may Allah bless you, may Allah give us more peace and more blessings. There's something about that. And then continual teachings of Islam completely warped my mind
and made me a Muslim. So my dear brothers, next time you say Assalamu alaikum, don't just say it at face value. You're saying it to the root of that individual. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon you. Last thing, inshallah, and I'll end. Many other things that we can go into. We haven't even gone into the depths of how to obtain tahliyah. Because if you don't obtain tahliyah, you don't go into tahliyah. If you don't go into tahliyah, you cannot obtain tajliyah. And tajliyah is the state where you start having outer world experiences that many Sufi saints, they say, seeing Rasulullah in your dream. Eating with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Perhaps I've shared the story with you in the past, but just for your information as well. After the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salam at the battles at the plains of Karbala, Yazid had sent his army into Medina. And he has said that the Sahaba and the Tabi'een in Medina and Masjid al-Nabi, their blood has been made halal for you. Astaghfirullah. And he says, even if you find them in the courtyard of Masjid al-Nabi, martyred. 900 Sahaba were martyred in the city of Medina. This blind Sahabi, he says, they left me alone because I was blind. And I would walk the streets of Medina, I would hear the wails of children. And he said, I began, and there was no azan said for 3 days. The only 3 days in the history of Medina, since Yathrib became Medina, where azan was not said because of the rule of Yazid. He says, I became very worried. It was Zuhr, first day that the army has come. He says, I go, and they grab me. They say, what are you doing? If you see you here again, we will behead you. Na'udhu billah, astaghfirullah, sahabi. He says, I am a blind man. I am an old man. Let me be. Something, the way I said it, they had raham upon me, this individual. He says, go, get away. The Roza Rasul, I felt my way to the Roza Rasul. So I go to it, I grab a hold of it, and I lay down. And then I begin to converse with Rasulullah. Ya Rasulullah, first time I'm going to miss Salatul Zuhr. First time I have not heard azan in my ears. This Sahabi, and you can find it in many books of hadith. This Sahabi, he says, I heard from the grave of Rasulullah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. A few minutes later, I heard the Iqamah, قَدْ قَامَتُ الصَّلَاةِ. Then he says, after a few minutes, I read Salah once again behind Rasulullah. He says the rest of Medina was crying. I was ecstatic with glee because once again I was reading namaz behind Rasulullah. He says the third day comes. I have not eaten anything. There's no food. Nobody's going to give me food. I have become a Sahabi, an Ashiq Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and they were beheading us. He says, however, they left me alone because I was blind and they thought I was crazy. So he says, I go to sleep. And this hunger is overcome with me. He says, I go to sleep. And as I'm sleeping, he says, I see Rasulullah in my dream. He says, I go to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ya Rasulullah. And Rasulullah comes up to him. And Rasulullah's sunnah, and the sunnah of the Sufis after him, where they always say salam first. Assalamu alaikum. Alaykum assalam. His response was where you meet the Sahabis. Rasulullah says, why are you so weak, my Sahabi? He said, Ya Rasulullah, these individuals that have boycotted us and that have laid siege to Medina have not fed me for 3 days. No one has come into Masjid al-Nabi for 3 days. Even to this day, if you go in Masjid al-Nabi and you're hungry, at Salat al-Maghrib, people will feed you. I was just there a few days ago. Whether you have a fast or not, it's open. You sit down, they will give you water, they will give you sharbat, they will give you juice, they will force feed you at times. Eat. You're the guest of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he said, 3 days I have not had a morsel of food. Rasulullah, he says, sit down. Rasulullah leans into his kurta, pulls out a piece of grain and bread, folds it, and he begins to feed me it. And he begins to feed it to me. He says, a few minutes later, I wake up. That bread is in my hands. And he says, my stomach is full. That is tajliyah. When you reach that stage, you become one with the state of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. So I was speaking, how do you get from takhliyah to tahliyah? And I'll end in the next 2 to 3 minutes, my dear brothers. Akhlaq. Akhlaq is character. Akhlaq is personality. I'll explain akhlaq with you with a simple story, inshallah we'll end. The story is about Hazrat Zainab, radiallahu ta'ala anha. For the sisters, which Hazrat Zainab am I referring to? There's a couple. So if you know all the Zainabs that were the companions of Rasulullah, can somebody name who Zainab was? Who was Zainab radiallahu ta'ala anha? Any sisters whose name is Zainab. Nobody knows a Zainab from the companions? Daughter of Bibi Fatima. Very good. And this is not that Zainab. Another Zainab. A Sahabiya of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. One of the first individuals to accept Islam. Another hint for you. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, we want to be Sufis and we don't know about the Ahlul Bayt. This was the eldest daughter of Rasulullah. The eldest daughter of Rasulullah's name was what? Zainab. Then Ruqayya. Then Kulthum. And then Hazrat Sayyida Kainat, Hazrat Fatima. Radiallahu ta'ala. Hazrat Zainab, by most accounts, she's the eldest. She stayed with her husband. Her husband was not a Muslim. Finally, and her husband was not a Muslim, but he was very kind to her. He never bothered her. He said, "You're on your deen, I'm on my deen." So finally, Rasulullah writes a letter to Zainab. Zainab, Allah has given permission. You can migrate from Makkah to Medina. The Makkans, they find out, they sent a envoy after her. Kill her if you see her. Now, this is the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. One of the soldiers, they come, and when they see that and she was walking with a small convoy, and she was pregnant. This individual comes up behind the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, pushes her. She falls on her stomach. The child is wasted, is martyred. It's gone. This is part of the Ahlul Bayt. The grandson of Rasulullah is gone, or the granddaughter is gone. The pregnancy is ruined. Some of the other individuals, there's a small scuffle, but she becomes extremely sick. A few months later, she passes away in the lap of Rasulullah in Medina. Conquest of Makkah happens a few years later. The individual who had pushed her, he became infamous within Muslims. We have to find the killer of the daughter of Rasulullah. Find him. Well, what happens in the conquest of Makkah? The Sahaba, they come back. Al-yawmu yawmul malhama. Today is the day of revenge. Today is the day of retribution. He spat on me, I will spit on him twice. It was the way it was. Muslims, 10,000 are now coming in waves on Makkah. The non-Muslims are cowering in fear. They're running. They're hiding. Rasulullah hears this chant. Al-yawmu yawmul malhama. The Sahaba, they have revenge. They've seen their mothers being murdered, their fathers being murdered, their clothes being ripped off. They saw that how they put the inside of a camel on the back of Rasulullah. They put thorns on the path of Rasulullah and his daughter, Hazrat Fatima radiallahu ta'ala. They saw all this. Rasulullah hears this akhlaq. He says, Al-yawmu yawmul marhama. Today is the day of rahmah. Today everyone will be forgiven. Whoever wants to seek refuge, whether you become Muslim or not, you will get refuge. No one will be harmed today. This a'lan is made. The killer of the daughter of Rasulullah, Hazrat Zainab radiallahu ta'ala anha, he puts a niqab on. Because he's fearful, if anybody sees me, they will kill me. So he goes up to and he fights and he gets into a long line of people doing bayt at the hands of Rasulullah, becoming Muslim at the hands of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. One other story, by the way, there's a young daughter who's also accepting Islam. Her name is Khalid. A young daughter for the sisters here. We should know these are heroes of Islam. She lived up to the age of 108. Over 15,000 narrations are from Khalid radiyallahu ta'ala. He says, I'm a young child. I go with my father. My father is accepting Islam. I have already accepted Islam. I'm shortening the story because I have fallen in love with Rasulullah. Rasulullah grabs me and he's held me in his lap. And there was a seal. There's a sign in Muhri Nubuwwah, the seal of prophethood on the back of Rasulullah. He says, I began to play with it. A young child Thousands of people are lined up, and this child is playing with the back of Rasulullah. So her father gets mad, grabs the child. What are you doing? You're going to get us both killed. This is the leader of the Muslims. This is the Khatamun Nabiyyin. One word of him and the Muslims will be on us. Leave him alone. Rasulullah, he says, never raise your voice at your daughters. Never raise your voice at your daughters, because your daughters are the izzah of the entire Muslim ummah. And he says, I continued to play with the Muhri Nubuwwah as people began to combine, except I was playing with it, and I had a red shawl on. And he says, may this red shawl cover you for as long as you wish to be covered. And she says, because of that dua, I lived for 108 years. So, Khalid, the story. Anyways, this Niqabi now, the killer, comes up in front of Rasulullah. He says, are you Muhammad? Obviously, he's Muhammad sallallahu. Yes, I am Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He says, you have said this is the day of retribution. What about killers? Will you give retribution? Will you give rahmah to even killers? Rasulullah looks at him intensely. And he says, I will even give rahmah to the killer of my daughter. Niqab is still on. Niqab is still on. The niqab is removed. Hazrat Umar is behind, actually, he shakes the niqab. He yanks the niqab off. I have been looking for you. I will do haqq, I will do justice. By Zainab radiallahu ta'ala, Rasulullah says, Umar, move away. He is under my protection. He has become Muslim. Umar, take him home. Feed him, clothe him, and house him until he wishes to be fed, clothed, and housed. That was the akhlaq of Rasulullah. Today, my dear brothers, if somebody says, yo, what are you doing? We get mad at him, and we will not give them forgiveness. Rasulullah forgave the killer of his daughter, of his eldermost daughter. My dear brothers, that is what being the Sufi is. That is what obtaining the tasawwuf is. That is what akhlaq is. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our struggles. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept the akhlaq that we're trying to emulate. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to obtain the seed of akhlaq from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And lastly, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put within our hearts the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Ameen wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Please stand for salam and zikr.
أنت نور الله فجرا جئت بعد النصر يسرا ربنا علاك قدرا يا إمام الأنبياء أنت في الوجدان حي أنت للعينين ضي أنت عند الحاضرين أنت هاد وصفي يا حبيبي يا محمد يا نبي سلام عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب سلام عليك صلوات الله عليك لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله 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 لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله.
Please read Surah Fatiha once, Surah Ikhlas 3 times, and Awal Akhir Durud Sharif. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina. Alhamdulillah. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب القبر وقنا عذاب الحشر وقنا عذاب القبر وقنا عذاب المرض وقنا عذاب الميزان. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام وإليك يرجع السلام. حينا ربنا بالسلام وأدخلنا دار السلام. رب اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي ربنا وتقبل دعاء. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran that we read, we ask you to send it foremost to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. We ask you to send it to all of the prophets, to all of the messengers, to all the sahabi, to all sahaba, to all the tabi'een, the tabi'een, to all the shuhada, the salihin, the siddiqeen, the shuhada. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you to send it to all the Sufis who have passed away, to all the walis of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to all of our loved ones who have passed away, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially it is the mercy of the grandmother and grandmother of Brother Ali. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make her grave a place of Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant her Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect her from even the whisper of the fire of Jahannam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive all of her sins, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to increase her ranks until she gets into Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, protect our children, protect our akhlaq, protect our iman. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue every single day to become better and better Muslims. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us Jannah in the neighborhood of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala khayri khalqihi wa nuri arshihi Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa dhurriyatihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya arham